Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Manning. We're going to be learning Module 5, Lesson 11, where we're learning to find the area of a rectangle whose sides are fractions, mixed numbers, and whole numbers. So we have a lot of different things that we're going to need to remember to be successful at this. And the first one is that length times width is how we find our area. The other is the skill of multiplying a fraction times a whole number. So when we multiply our fraction times our whole number, we can multiply first or we can divide first, because this 1/3 is actually equal to 1 divided by 3. So we could look at this problem and say 1 times 2 divided by 3, or we could say 1 divided by 3 times 2. Now, in this case, we can't take 1 divided by 3 and get anything other than a decimal or another fraction. So we're going to go up here and we're first going to multiply. 1 times 2 is 2 divided by 3 gives me 2/3. We also have to remember how to take a fraction times a fraction. So we multiply our numerator times our numerator and our denominator times our denominator. So this one ends up being 1/12. So we have to remember skills that we brought in from multiple lessons. Multiplying a fraction by a whole number, multiplying a fraction times a fraction, also seeing fractions as division. The other one you're going to need is adding fractions. Remember, when we add fractions, we have to have a common denominator here before we can add them. So this 3 has to become a 6, and I do that by multiplying it by the fractional equivalent to 1, which is 2/2. So my addition problem here becomes 2/6 plus 2/6, which is equal to 4/6. With our problem set, this is problem A. Rectangle has a length of 4.5 units and a width of 2.5 units. But what we're going to do is we're going to decompose those numbers because we're finding the area of this rectangle. And area, again, is our length times our width. So we're going to take our length times our width. But for us to do that, we haven't learned how to take a mixed number times a mixed number. So what we're going to do is break it apart into our whole number and our fraction. So for 2.5, that's 2.5 and 4.5. So I'm going to decompose my shape. And now I have 4 smaller rectangles that I can multiply. I can multiply a whole number by a whole number. My length here is 4 times my width, which is 2, and get a volume of, or an area, sorry, of 8 units. This is 4 times 1/2, which we can multiply a whole number times a fraction. 4 times 1 divided by 2 is 4/2, or 2. Then I have a length of 1/2 and a height of 2, so 1/2 times 2, which again is a fraction times a whole number. 2 times 1 equals 2 over 2, which is 1. And then a length of 1/2 and a height of 1/2. So it's 1/2 times 1/2, which gives me an area of 1/4. So now the next part, then we have to put them back together. Take all of our partial products, 8 plus 1 plus 2 plus my 1/4. And I'm going to put 8 and 2 together to get 10 plus 1 more, which is 11 and 1/4. So I have a total area of 11 and 1/4 units squared. But the question also asks for you to show what you did with multiplication. So if our problem that we were doing, our length was 4.5 times 2.5, we didn't just multiply that. What we did was we broke it apart. we did our first we did 2 times 4. And then we added that to 1/2 times 2. And then we did 4 times 1/2. And then we did 1/2 times 1/2. That one looks like a addition symbol, a plus sign. So we multiplied each of these first, that's why they're in parentheses, and then we went back and we put them back together, put our partial products back together with addition to get a total volume of 11 and 1/4, or I'm sorry, a total area of 11 and 1/4 units squared. So for problem set rectangle A, we've done that one together and we ended up with an area of 11 and 1/4 units squared. So I want you to pause the video here and write down the length and the width of rectangle B, C, and D. And those are going to be what you solve with. So for problem set number 3, you have to read this question very carefully. Colleen and Caroline each built rectangles out of square tiles, meaning these square tiles have a length and a width that are the same, in places of 3 rows of 5. So I have 3 rows here and each row has 5 in them for both of my rectangles. And Colleen used tiles that measured 1 2/3 centimeters and in length, which because it's a square means that her height is 1 2/3 of a square. Carolyn used tiles that measured 3 1/3 centimeters in length, which means that her height of her square was 3 1/3 centimeters. So that means for Colleen up here, this is a 1.5 or 1 2/3 by 1 2/3 square. And for Carolyn, this square up here or this square up here, they have the same dimensions as that one square that I labeled. So it doesn't matter, but that's going to help you figure out how to solve those word problems, is realizing that the shape itself is a rectangle, but we've tiled it with squares. Thanks so much, guys. Feel free to rewatch the video and have any questions you have ready for your teacher.